I've always said, whatever God ordained, he will sustain. And it's not something that you would ever have to force. Sometimes God does ordain stuff, but we try to make it happen on our own. And even though it's something that God ordained, when we try to make it happen ourselves, or we try to force the results that God showed us, we come up with illegitimate results, because that's not the way he was doing it. We can't go on our own path to bring forth what God said he was going to do. If it's not the instructions he gave you, you're going to come up with illegitimate results. Doesn't mean that the thing that he promised you won't come forth. But there can be some problems when you're trying to do it yourself. And as I was thinking about this yesterday, the story of Abraham and Sarah came to mind. Now God, before he changed Abram to Abraham, when he was still Abram, God promised him that, listen, you're going to have a son and your descendants are going to be so great, it'll be like trying to count the stars in the sky. And Abram received that promise. Now, as time went on, he didn't have a son. And Sarai, his wife, decided, my husband doesn't have a son and I'm barren. So what did she do? She didn't wait for God. She tried to force the situation. And she went and brought Hagar, her maidservant, and she gave her servant to her husband to be his wife. And her servant conceived a son. Well, here's the problem. Ishmael was not the son he wasn't the covenant son. That was not the son that God ordained that he would make his covenant with. And yep, Abram had a son, but guess what happened as time went on? They said that Hagar got arrogant and Sarai grew very bitter and she grew jealous. Now, all of these things are happening because she went to try to make something happen that God already said he was going to do, but she didn't wait for God. She went and tried to make it herself. She decided, I'm not qualified to bring this son forth for my husband, so I'm going to intervene and bring forth a younger woman, and I'm going to give her to my husband so that he can have his son. But now there's jealousy, there's bitterness. And if it was a God ordained thing, there would be no bitterness, there would not be jealousy, because what does the word say? The blessing of the Lord maketh one rich, and he doesn't add any sorrow to it. So has this son, and Ishmael grew up, and around the time Ishmael was about 13, God appeared to Abram again. I think Abram was 86 years old at the time. And at this point, this is when God changed Abram's name. He said, you'll no longer be Abram, which is exalted father. I'm changing your name to Abraham, which means father of nations. And Sarai will no longer be Sarai, but her name's going to be Sarah, which means princess. And if you go back and you look up the original Hebrew meaning of the word Sarai, it means quarrelsome one, or one who likes to quarrel. So God changed their names to princess and father of nations. So here comes God again when Abram is 99 and he's changed his name to Abraham. He says, Sarah is going to be a mother of many, and she's going to give you a son. And Abram said, he faced, the word says Abraham fell down on the ground in worship the Lord. But at that time, internally, he laughed and he said, shall I be a father at 100? And Sarah, when she's 90 years old? So he got up and he said, yes, Lord, indeed, bless Ishmael. Now, God told him he was going to give him a son, and Sarah was going to be the mother. So even though Abraham took the word and he fell on his face and worshiped, he tried to reason within himself, this cannot be possible. I'm an old man. My wife is old. She's barren. He's trying to reason in himself. God must mean that he's going to do it through Ishmael, because this happens after God has, told Abraham that the covenant mark would now be the circumcision, of each male child after the 8th day. And so he's decided it must be Ishmael, and Sarah will be like a mother. He's like, and he got up and he said, yes, Lord, indeed, bless Ishmael. And what did God respond with? That's not what I said. I said Sarah will bring forth a son. I will bless Ishmael, but my covenant, my contract will be with Isaac. Isaac was the covenant child. Isaac was the one that God wanted to make his covenant with. That was the promised child. And when Abraham was 100, that is when Isaac was born. So it was 14 years from the time when God spoke, from when it was 14 years, Ishmael was about 14 years old when Isaac was born. And even after they grew older, it says Ishmael used to tease Isaac, and Sarah sent Ishmael and Hagar away because Ishmael was teasing. Look, the illegitimate result, the result that Sarai produced, that was not God's order, started to then taunt the promise. And so they sent him away. But see, that's an ongoing issue because that was something she tried to manipulate to bring forth what God wanted, but God already had a plan. They just had to wait for it. And the word tells us that as we are waiting, we're trusting God. It brings forth patience and it brings forth confidence in him. So don't try to manipulate what God says. When God shows you something, if he gives you a promise, don't do anything unless he gives you specific instructions. Because when you try to manipulate that thing and decide you're not qualified, it's not possible to happen this way, and you try to make it happen your way, guess what? You might produce some results, but they're not going to be the results that God wanted. And that thing can go on to taunt you and cause you to be bitter and cause you to be jealous. And it just causes issues because that wasn't his plan. You have to wait for God to do what he said he was going to do, because there is a promise, there is a blessing, and that's where the covenant is and what he wants to do. So there is a timing for everything that God has. It might not happen on your timetable, but there's a season, there's a timing for everything. Because notice, if you will, Isaac was not conceived until God changed Abram's name to Abraham and Sarai to Sarah. Their identity changed. So to go forth and manipulate things and make it happen when you want to, it's not time. See, there's a preparation period. There's a planning period. They had to be elevated beyond what they are. Abram had to go from exalted father to Abraham, father of nations. And Sarai had to go from one who likes to quarrel to princess. That's a major shift. To be the one who likes to quarrel, that's what your name means, to princess. That's royalty. She was upgraded to royalty. So the promise, the covenant blessing, didn't happen until after God had changed their names and exalted them. So you have to wait, because there's an elevation and there's a preparation period that has to occur before the blessing comes.